There's been a lot of interesting things happening in Africa in the past couple of years. Investments in technology, and then there's a growing number of startups coming up out of Africa. In the past couple of years, the growth rate has been actually very significant. And in 2018, investment in startup activities in Africa surpassed the $1 billion margin. And this includes startups in the space industry and in other industries like agriculture and fintech. This has actually led to an increasing number of investments in new space startups in Africa also. This map shows how much the number of satellites that has been launched by African countries. And up till date, we have about 9 countries in Africa with satellites in space. Altogether, they've put together 35 satellites in space. And then we have 3 other multilateral projects where African countries come together. In space in Africa, what we do is to provide accurate information and data about the African space industry, covering different segments of the industry. We believe a lot of people outside of Africa and in Africa do not actually know what's going on in Africa, especially in the space industry. And we are here to tell the story. We started off last year, April. The company started in April last year. And we are based in Lagos with operations in 5 different African countries. And in June this year, we released our first industry report, which profiled what has happened in the industry between 1998 to 2019. And I'm here to share some of the data that we were able to come up with. Up till date, 38 satellites have been launched by African countries. And in the next 5 years, we expect over 60 satellites to be launched by different countries. This is very impressive due to the fact that this is coming from Africa. This shows the distribution of countries that are developing space programs in Africa. By the year 2024, these countries would have at least a satellite in space. Currently, we have 9 countries with satellites. In 2024, the number is going to increase to at least 16 countries. Okay. And unlike what people think, people used to assume that a lot of African countries cannot actually afford space program. But due to our research, we've discovered that African countries have been instrumental in funding space projects in Africa from governments and also investment from commercial sector. This is the distribution of how much investment each countries have put into satellites projects in Africa, with Egypt being the leading country with over $700 million investment, followed by multilateral projects where countries actually came together to develop satellites program. With over $600 million spent on that. And then we have countries like Morocco, Angola, Nigeria, Algeria. South Africa is interesting because they have the highest number of satellites from Africa, but they've also spent a very small amount of money because a lot of the projects are developed in-house, unlike other countries that subcontract their projects. Now, there's a lot of business opportunities in Africa with revenue from different segments. Due to investment, we've seen that the industry is currently worth about $7 billion, with major revenue coming from satellite television, GNSS and other services, and FSS and MSS. And it is projected that by 2024, the industry would be worth over $10 billion. We've also done a study on new space companies in Africa. Yesterday, we released a report on 35 commercial space companies in Africa that are developing different technologies in the industry. From the study, a lot of the companies are located in South Africa, with other countries in Mauritius, Nigeria, Egypt, Tunisia, Sudan, and Egypt. And majority of the companies are privately owned, while we've also seen some investments from government, a situation where government start a company, and they look forward to getting the company go public. Then a lot of the companies are actually developing satellite components, which are being sold to global markets. And we have space tourism companies and companies developing technologies for ground station. A lot of these companies are also attracting investment, with more than 20 countries attracting investment between $500,000 to $14 million seed investment. And aside from equity funding, bootstrapping has been the way forward for a lot of companies in Africa. And a lot of these companies are also at a growth stage where they already have an MVP product, and they are looking at expanding their businesses. And we also have a lot of companies that are looking at, that are already established companies looking at going public. There are a lot of business opportunities in Africa now with increasing interest from the government and from the private sector. And this provides a lot of opportunities for companies and institutions from outside of Africa. Because a lot of these countries that are trying to develop the space program, they don't have the capabilities. So they need support from companies in Europe, in America, in Asia to develop these capabilities for them. So this opened up opportunities for a lot of companies from outside of Africa. We are a small team of about 10 people working out of 5 countries in Africa, and our mission is to provide detailed information about industry to show business opportunities in the African space industry, and to capitalize on all of this to shape the future of the industry. Thank you very much.
Next up, I'd like to welcome to the stage the co-founder of High Earth Orbit Robotics, Will Crow.
Hello, everyone. Probably a good thing Buzz just left, because I would have been pretty starstruck. So I just want to mention, this is not our photo that you see here behind me, but it's our ambition at my company to make this kind of eye-watering, gorgeous photo of objects that matter in space to be possible within 24 hours of them being requested anywhere within the Earth-Moon system. And right now, it's only really possible from the ISS. So we think it's incredibly important to start getting out there and imaging in space, from space. And what we thought until a week ago, it's a $5 billion market, but it seems to be growing. Everyone's announcing new constellations, so there's a real demand for this. So before I go to the next slide, I was wondering who here does not feel the reality distortion field that's present here at the IAC? Anyone at all? Good, that's the right answer. Because when we started this company, it was born out of the IAC. If this works. Okay, cool. So I actually won the Move an Asteroid Award from the Space Generation Advisory Council in 2015. And when I won it, we came to the IAC straight after, and I thought, oh my God, we've got this great idea for intercepting asteroids as they come through the Earth-Moon system. It's better than planetary resources, better than deep space industries. Everyone's going to invest. It's going to be amazing. We're going to be rich. Not really the case. I mean, it's a great system, though. So the idea is that there's a bunch of asteroids that come closer than the moon every year. Last year, there were 80. This year, there's already been 56. And it's a way of doing asteroid intercepts without ever leaving Earth orbit. So last year, for example, there were about 5 asteroids that could have been intercepted with just a constellation of 12 satellites in a GEO plus 500 kilometer orbit. And it meant that you would be able to build up the Google Maps of space resources. And we tried to sell this. So in 2018, just last year, I went to Silicon Valley, sponsored by my university. And I pitched a bunch of people. One pitch in particular was to the Draper family of Silicon Valley fame. And I said, we're going to build the Google Maps of asteroid resources. And they're like, oh my God, this is exactly what we want to fund. This is what we love. So how long till you can get the resources out of the asteroids? And I said, oh, about 15 years, you know. It's an ambitious timeline, but we think we can do it. And they're like, no, we need it within 7. Sorry. So that was a huge learning in Silicon Valley, is that if you've got investors, you can't say 15 years as a timeline. You've got to start bringing money in generally within that 10 to 7 year time frame, and preferably far closer than that. So what we did then, we asked, okay, what else can we use this technology on? And it turns out space situational awareness is a huge problem. So we thought, okay, we'll stick a bunch of these satellites in geo. At the end of life, we'll be able to do the asteroid missions anyway. And behind me here, I've got an image of Telkom-1, which is an Indonesian satellite that blew up in 2017, caused a bunch of damage to the orbit. They lost about $100 million US as well. But the image you can get today, just there on your left, is just a point. You can't really understand what happened, and there was no way you could have known before time what the problem was. So what we intend to do is get really close to these satellites, get a really high definition image of them, and help people really understand what damage might be happening. So we tried selling this to investors as well, probably wasted about a year of time, and we're like, oh my God, we can't explain this to investors. They don't really understand the problem. They think the market size is too small. But then earlier this year, we got a call from our defense department, who's one of the customers we've been talking to. So late last year, they said, okay, well, we'll probably get you guys to do a tech demo. And we're like, okay, well, I guess we'll go for free and try and do some work for them. And they said, no, we're going to pay you. And give us 3 quotes, and we'll pay you one of the quotes. And we're like, oh my God, okay, so we'll do 3 different quotes. One of them will look really ambitious. The middle one will be the one we want them to pay, and we'll give them a low quote as well. They end up paying the highest amount. And I think what this proves is that customers who really want your service are going to pay a lot for that service, and they'll pay you in advance as well. So something that we're really excited about, it's not quite public yet, so please don't share too widely. We've actually got a satellite in orbit right now, ready to go as soon as we leave the IAC, and we're starting to take images of satellites. And wait for it, defense isn't our only customer. We've got 2 commercial customers as well. And this will be the first time ever worldwide that an image has been taken of a satellite from another satellite in space, where both the provider of the image and the customer are commercial entities. So it's really fantastic because all we've taken on in terms of investment is $10,000 from friends and family, and everything else is just paid in advance by customers. So it can be done for crazy cheap. You too can have a mission in space, and afterwards we're going to have a breakfast, and I'd love to talk to more entrepreneurs how you can make this happen. Thanks so much, guys. Really appreciate your time.
Our last speaker today is the CEO of Mana Electric. Please help me welcome to the stage, Joost van Oorschot.
So first of all, thank you all for being here today. So I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach to my entrepreneurial journey. And for me, it all starts after high school. Really after high school, you know, like most 18-year-olds, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. And in the end, what I actually decided to do was to, if it works, to travel to Australia for a year, take a year abroad, really figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And I'm a big, avid scuba diving fan and really immersed myself into this world. And really, there's a lot of correlation between scuba diving and space as well, because it's really an alien world that you go into. So coming back from Australia, I decided, okay, I need to do something useful with my life. I decided to go to university, study economics specifically, but I very quickly figured out that it wasn't really a fit for me. It was too theoretical. And so I went back diving again. And really the thing that I ran into is that I felt lost. I felt really lost, and I was missing a purpose in my life. Economics wasn't it. I loved scuba diving, of course, but I didn't really feel like it could make a difference in my life. And around this time is when I really was researching so much about space, reading every day 4 hours on space missions and the space industry. And every night I was looking out of my window and seeing the moon above me. And around this time, everything clicked together, and I was around 20 years old. And I decided, sorry, pardon my language, screw it. I'm gonna make my life purpose to build a moon base. And really, when you look at a moon base, the biggest issue that you run into in the space industry in general is electrical power. Because if you want to live in space, electrical power is as important as food and shelter have been on Earth. And in particular, if you want to do resource utilization or you want to produce goods in space so that you can build such a moon base, you're looking at least a megawatt of power. So that was really, I figured that out at 20, okay, if I want to do something like this, that's where I got to go. But you're looking at the space industry, this costs billions, and really the only examples you have of space entrepreneurs are these guys, and they're billionaires. So what I was thinking, okay, so what I got to do is create $1 billion business, make sure that I sell it, and then be able to finance my dream of going to space. And that's really how I started my first business, really focused on music algorithms. This was around the time when Spotify was coming out, so we grew it quite significantly. But if I can give one advice as well, never enter the music industry. It's incredibly difficult, and the record labels own everything. So that journey ended at some point, and then I wanted to get back into the space side of things. So I started a second company, if the slide will pop up. Yeah, and we really focused on heat detection from space. So when you're looking at sustainability and being able to understand, you know, where are the energy pockets in a city, you hear a lot about heat islands lately. It's really nice to have the data, and space is an awesome provider of this data. But really the customers were usually governments, so it takes a long time to convince them to be your customers, to actually want to do this. So the scalability of the concept wasn't there. And so I went back to basics. I went back to basics, really to the initial concept of how will we power a lunar economy. And that's where the concept of MANA came up, and this was around the time when Luxembourg also came out with their Space Resources initiative. And I would just like to give you an artistic representation of how we envision powering a lunar economy. So really we envision having landers for the moon, and that these deploy robotic vehicles. It's not working at all. Yeah, that these deploy robotic vehicles which bring back resources to a factory, and these resources can be processed to then produce fully functional solar panels, which can then be installed in large-scale solar parks on the moon. And this is really the concept behind MANA and where we started. And obviously, everyone must be thinking, oh, okay, this guy is another one of these crazy guys who wants to produce solar power on the moon. And that's why you got to have a terrestrial business case as well. And so going back to down to earth, really what we're focused on at MANA initially is to first build inexpensive solar capacity on Earth, and then to eventually do the same on the moon. So using the same technology, we can actually produce solar panels here on Earth using desert sand. And the real value add there is that we can produce them cheaper than the way they are produced today. We can produce them cleaner, so less emissions. And finally, we can produce them locally, which in many countries is a huge value add. So, well, the slides, I'm just going to leave it at that. Really, where we are right now, we have about 20 employees. We're growing quite rapidly. We have 30 open positions right now, and it's all been possible through our relationship with the Luxembourg Space Agency and Luxembourg in general. And we're growing at a really fast rate, looking for people to join us. And it's been an amazing adventure. And if I can give one advice to everyone or any young entrepreneur that is here in the room, I would say find a lifelong goal that you can try and move towards. And even if you end up only 10% of the way, you're making a difference in this world, and that has made all the difference in my life to be able to go on this entrepreneurial journey and create a business which is now flourishing in Luxembourg. So thank you all.
We will have a, Will was actually selling it for us. We will have a reception just outside the doors, so please join us in speaking to all of our wonderful panelists and entrepreneurs that we had today. This concludes our 2019 Space Entrepreneurs GNF. Please join me in giving one more round of applause for all of our wonderful speakers.